She was an orphan girl raised by a cousin in a foreign land. She had no throne, no army, no political power. She was a woman in a world where women were expected to be silent and invisible, and yet God chose her. Not because she was the most powerful, not because she was the most educated, not because she demanded a seat at the table. He chose her because she was willing to fast, willing to pray, willing to risk everything. There is a moment in every woman's life when God whispers, "This is why I put you here." Maybe you are standing at a crossroads right now. Maybe you feel small, overlooked, unqualified. Maybe you wonder if your story matters, that Esther once stood in a palace corridor, trembling, knowing that one wrong step could mean her death. She had to choose between safety and purpose, between silence and courage, between blending in and standing up, and what she chose changed the course of an entire nation. I want to walk with you through her story today, not just as history, but as a mirror, because somewhere in Esther's journey, you will find yourself. If you believe in the power of this story to touch the heart and transform thoughts, sign up now. Together, we can bring these teachings to those who haven't had the chance to hear them yet. This is a pure writing task, so no special skill is needed. Here is the full story. Hook women of the Bible. Esther, she was an orphan girl raised by a cousin in a foreign land. She had no throne, no army, no political power. She was a woman in a world where women were expected to be silent and invisible. And yet God chose her, not because she was the most powerful, not because she was the most educated, not because she demanded a seat at the table. He chose her because she was willing to fast, willing to pray, willing to risk everything. There is a moment in every woman's life when God whispers, "This is why I put you here." Maybe you are standing at a crossroads right now. Maybe you feel small, overlooked, unqualified. Maybe you wonder if your story matters. Esther once stood in a palace corridor, trembling, knowing that one wrong step could mean her death. She had to choose between safety and purpose, between silence and courage, between blending in and standing up. And what she chose changed the course of an entire nation. I want to walk with you through her story today, not just as history, but as a mirror, because somewhere in Esther's journey, you will find yourself. If you believe in the power of this story to touch the heart and transform thoughts, sign up now. Together, we can bring these teachings to those who haven't had the chance to hear them yet. Esther, for such a time as this, a story for the women of the Bible channel. My name is Esther, though that is not the name I was given at birth. My mother and father called me Hadassah, which means myrtle, a small, fragrant tree that grows even in the rocky places, even in the dry wilderness, even where no one expects beauty to survive. I have thought about that name many times over the years. A myrtle does not grow tall like a cedar. It does not spread wide like an oak. It is humble. It is fragrant. It blooms quietly without announcing itself to the world. And perhaps that is why God chose it for me before I ever knew what my life would become. I was born in Susa, the royal city of Persia. My people, the Jewish people, had been carried there as exiles generations before my birth. We were strangers in that land. We lived under the rule of a king who did not know our God, and we learned very early to walk carefully, to speak softly, and to hold our heritage close, like a flame cupped in trembling hands, precious and vulnerable all at once. I do not remember my parents. They died when I was very young, and I have only the faintest impressions of them, the warmth of arms around me, the smell of bread baking on a cold evening, the sound of a woman's voice singing something low and beautiful in the night. Those impressions are like the last light of a candle before it goes out. Soft, then gone. What I remember clearly is Mordecai, my cousin Mordecai, who became everything to me. He was older, serious in the way of men who carry responsibility without complaint. He had strong hands and quiet eyes, and he had a way of looking at you that made you feel seen all the way down to the place where your fears lived. When my parents died, he did not hesitate. He took me in and raised me as his own daughter. I have never forgotten that. In a world where orphans could be overlooked, discarded, used, Mordecai chose me. And in doing so, he taught me the first great lesson of my life. Love is not a feeling, it is a decision. We lived simply in Susa. Mordecai worked at the king's gate, which meant he was there every day, watching the movement of the city, listening to conversations, learning the rhythms of the palace life that went on behind those great stone walls. He was a careful man, an observant man, and he raised me to be the same. Hadassah, he would say, sitting across from me in the evenings, his voice low and deliberate. A wise woman learns to see what others overlook. I did not fully understand what he meant then. I was young, I was small. I was an orphan girl in a foreign city, and the world felt very large and very uncertain. But I listened. I always listened. Our home was modest. The walls were plain, the furniture simple. But in the evenings, when the city grew quiet, Mordecai would tell me stories. Stories of Abraham walking into the unknown, trusting a voice he could not see. Stories of Moses trembling at a burning bush, arguing with God about his own inadequacy. Stories of women, Miriam, dancing at the edge of the sea. Ruth, gleaning in a foreign field. Deborah, sitting under a palm tree, speaking the word of God with calm authority. I loved those stories. I would wrap my arms around my knees and lean forward, breathing them in. And somewhere deep inside the quiet child that I was, something was being shaped that I would not have words for until much later. Faith. Not a loud faith. Not a dramatic faith. A quiet, steady, stubborn faith. The kind that holds on even when it cannot explain itself, even when it cannot see the road ahead, even when the night is very long. I grew up watching the city. I would sit by the window in the early mornings and watch the way light moved across the stones, and the way people moved through their days with purpose or with weariness. And I would wonder what God saw when he looked down at all of us. Did he see the baker carrying bread before dawn, his face tired but his hands still moving? Did he see the children chasing each other through the market alleys, laughing with the total freedom of those who do not yet know worry? Did he see me, an orphan girl, a Jewish girl, a girl with no inheritance, no status, no name that anyone in the great court of Persia would recognize or care about? Did he see me? I used to pray about that. Not elaborate prayers, just quiet words, sometimes whispered, sometimes only thought. God of my fathers, God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, do you see me? Do you know my name? I did not always hear an answer, but I kept asking. And there is something about the asking that keeps you tethered to the one you are asking. That is something I have learned. Prayer is not only about receiving answers, it is about staying close. It is about saying every day in the quiet of your own heart, I believe you are there. I believe you hear me. I believe you have not forgotten me. Those years of ordinary life, the cooking, the weaving, the walking to the market, the evenings listening to Mordecai's stories, those years were not empty. They were preparation. I did not know it then. I did not see the shape of what was coming. None of us ever do. We see only the present moment, the bread on the table, the dust on the floor, the sound of the city waking up outside the window. We see only what is in front of us, but God sees the whole story. God sees the ending from the beginning, and he is always working, even in the ordinary moments, even in the years that feel like nothing is happening, even in the waiting. I was maybe 15 or 16 when things began to change in the city. There was a commotion, a restlessness that moved through Susa like a wind before a storm, whispers in the market, looks exchanged between neighbors. Men gathered at the gate speaking in low voices that stopped when he got too close. Something had happened in the palace. Queen Vashti, the great and beautiful Queen Vashti, had refused the king's command. The king, Ahasuerus, or Xerxes, as some called him, had summoned her to appear before his guests, his nobles, his court, and she had refused. The whole city buzzed with it. Some women whispered the queen's name with something like admiration. She refused. She said no, but the king was furious. And in the kingdom of Persia, when the king was furious, the consequences were not small. Vashti was removed from her position. Her crown was taken away. And the king, advised by his nobles, began a search across all the provinces for a new queen. Young women were brought to Susa, brought to the palace, brought to begin a year of preparation in the house of Haggai, the king's eunuch who oversaw the women. And Mordecai, sitting at the gate, hearing all of this, Mordecai looked at me. I remember the way he looked at me that evening, thoughtful, searching, a little afraid, though he tried to hide it. Hadassah, he said, and his voice was careful. The way a man's voice gets when he's trying to think and speak at the same time. I need you to listen to me. I was listening. I was always listening. And what he said next was the beginning of everything. My name was put forward. My name, Hadassah, Esther, the orphan girl who sat by windows watching light move across stones. The girl who prayed quiet prayers into empty mornings and was never quite sure anyone heard. That girl and I did not know whether to be terrified or to trust, but I had learned sitting in that small home, listening to stories of Abraham and Moses and Ruth, that there is often not much difference between those two things, terrified and trusting. They can live in the same heart at the same time. And perhaps that is exactly where faith begins. Not when the fear is gone, but when you move forward anyway, with trembling hands, with a quietly whispering heart, with nothing but the old, stubborn, inherited belief that the God who saw Abraham in his wandering, and Moses at his burning bush, and Ruth in her foreign field, also sees you, also sees me. God of my fathers, I prayed that night, lying very still in the dark, listening to the city settle into sleep. I do not know what is ahead. I do not know if I am ready, but you have always been faithful, and so I will trust you. Whatever comes, I will trust you. I did not sleep much that night, but when morning came, I rose and I walked forward, because that is what faith looks like most of the time. Not a dramatic leap, just one quiet step. Then another. Then another. And you trust that the God who called you is the God who goes before you every single time. I will never forget the first morning I woke inside the palace walls. The air was different there, heavier somehow, layered with the scent of cedar oil and burning incense and something else I could not name, something that belonged only to places where power lives. The walls were stone, but they were dressed in cedar wood and hung with woven curtains of violet and crimson and white. The floors were cold beneath my feet, polished smooth by years of footsteps, and when I stood on them in the early morning dark, I could feel the chill move up through the soles of my feet and into my legs, reminding me that this place, for all its beauty, was not home. I was not alone. There were many of us, young women from across the provinces, gathered here for the same uncertain purpose. We did not speak much at first. We moved around each other carefully, like people in a foreign country who do not share a language, finding our way by watching instead of asking. Some of the girls were very beautiful in a way that announced itself immediately, tall and dark-eyed, with the kind of confidence that comes from being admired your whole life. Some were quiet, like me, holding themselves inward, adjusting. All of us were far from home. All of us were waiting. Haggai, who oversaw the house of women, was a careful and perceptive man. He watched us. He noticed things. And within the first days, he noticed me. I did not know why. I was not the most beautiful girl in that house. I was not the tallest or the most striking. I was simply myself, steady and attentive and perhaps a little more thoughtful than some, because Mordecai had raised me to observe, to listen, to see what others overlooked. Haggai gave me special portions. He assigned me 7 maids. He moved me and my maids to the best place in the house of women. I received this with gratitude, not pride. Pride is a dangerous companion in a palace. I had seen enough, even in my short life, to know that. The preparation lasted 12 months. 12 months of beauty treatments, oil of myrrh for the first 6 months, and then spices and ointments for the second 6. It sounds luxurious, perhaps. And in some ways, it was. The oils were fragrant and rich. The maids were kind. The food was plentiful in a way I had never known before. But luxury does not prevent loneliness. And I was in those months deeply lonely. Not the sharp loneliness of grief, more like a low, persistent ache, like a song playing in the next room that you can hear but never quite make out. I missed Mordecai. I missed our small home, the simplicity of it, the way the evening light came through the window at a particular angle. I missed the smell of ordinary bread. I missed praying out loud without wondering who might hear me. Thanks because I had done what Mordecai asked, I had not revealed my people or my kindred. My Jewish identity was a secret held close, like the flame in cupped hands. And keeping a secret, even a small one, is a kind of weight. You carry it with you everywhere. It sits quietly in every conversation. It shapes every answer you give. I was Esther in that palace, not Hadassah. Esther, the Persian name, the acceptable name, the name that would not raise questions or draw attention to the fact that I was not one of them. Not from here, not entirely safe. I prayed differently in those months. My prayers became more interior, more private, more carefully hidden, even within myself. God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, you know who I am even when I cannot say it aloud. You know my people even when I cannot name them. You see the truth of me even when I must wear a different face. Do not forget me here. Do not let me forget you. I've found small ways to hold on to myself. In the early mornings before the house stirred, I would sit quietly and recite the words Mordecai had taught me. The old words, the faithful words. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. I whispered them so softly they barely made a sound. But they were enough. They were a thread connecting me to everything that had formed me, everything that held me, even in this polished and perfumed and foreign place. Mordecai came to the court of the women's house every day, not to see me, that would have been too obvious, but to walk near, to observe, to let me know without words that he was there, that I was not forgotten. Sometimes I would catch a glimpse of him through a doorway or across a courtyard, and something in me would settle. He was still there. He was still watching. And through him, I felt the presence of something larger watching too. God does not always speak in thunder. He often speaks through the people who love us faithfully, consistently, quietly, through the ones who show up day after day, simply to be present, to let you know that you are not alone. I thought often in those 12 months about what it means to be prepared for something you cannot fully see. All of this beauty treatment, all of this preparation, it was oriented toward one night, one audience with the king, a single encounter that would determine everything. And none of us knew exactly what that encounter would require. None of us knew what the king would see or want or choose. We were preparing for something we could not control. And I thought in the quiet of those mornings that this is very often what God asks of us. Prepare, wait, trust. You cannot control the outcome. You cannot see the ending. You can only be faithful in the preparation, present in the waiting, and trusting in the one who holds the outcome in his hands. I thought about Ruth. She did not know when she went to glean in Boaz's field that she was walking into a story of redemption. She was simply hungry. She was simply doing the next faithful thing. And God was working in it all. That thought became a kind of anchor for me in those months. Do the next faithful thing. Trust God with the rest. It sounds simple. It is not simple. It requires the kind of daily surrender that is not dramatic or glamorous. It is quiet. It is sometimes painful. It is the kind of faith that does not feel heroic while you are living it. It only looks heroic from the outside, looking back. When it was my turn to go before the king, Haggai helped me prepare. He had become, in his quiet way, an ally. And when he asked what I wanted to take with me, what ornaments, what adornments, what presentation, I took only what he suggested, nothing more. Not because I was passive, but because I had come to trust his knowledge of this place, his understanding of what was needed here. And perhaps because I had learned over those 12 months that the most powerful thing you can carry into any room is not your finest jewels. It is your truest self. Prepared, yes. Attentive, yes. But genuinely, honestly, quietly yourself. I walked toward the king's chambers in the evening of the 10th month of the 4th year of the king's reign. My hands were steady, my heart was not, but I had made a kind of peace with that. My heart could tremble, my feet could still move forward. I prayed one more time, very quietly, walking. God, you brought me here. You saw me in that small house. You saw me at that window. You see me now. I am not prepared in any way that matters except this. I trust you. Whatever happens tonight, I trust you. And I walked in. I became Queen of Persia. And the day they placed that crown on my head was one of the most disorienting moments of my life. I did not feel transformed. I felt the same girl who had sat by a window watching light move across stones, the same girl who prayed quiet prayers into dark mornings, the same girl who had grown up on stories of Abraham and Moses and Ruth and had learned to believe in a God who sees the overlooked. Only now I wore a crown, and everything around me was different. The court was vast and formal. People bowed. People deferred. People watched me with careful, calculated eyes, trying to understand what kind of queen I would be, what I would favor, what I would oppose. I moved through all of it carefully. I had learned that in the palace. Move carefully. Listen more than you speak. See what others overlook. Mordecai came to the king's gate every day, and in his coming, in his faithfulness, I felt a continuity with everything I had been before the crown. And then came the day that changed everything. Mordecai sent me a message. The words were plain, but their weight was enormous. Haman the Agagite, who had been elevated above all the other officials, who had been given a seat of honor, who had been granted the extraordinary privilege of having all the king's servants bow down to him wherever he passed. All the servants bowed, all except Mordecai. I knew why. Mordecai would not bow. Not to this man. Not for reasons he could easily explain to those who did not know him, who did not know us, who did not know the long, complicated, painful history between the Jewish people and the Agagites. He would not bow, and Haman noticed. Haman's pride was injured, and an injured pride in a powerful man is one of the most dangerous things in the world. Haman did not simply decide to punish Mordecai. He decided to destroy all the Jewish people, every man, woman, and child in the entire empire. He went to the king. He spoke carefully crafted words about our people who kept to themselves, who had their own laws, who were different. He offered money. The king agreed. He gave Haman his signet ring. He said, "The people and the silver are yours. Do with them as you please." Just like that. The decree went out. Casts, lots, Purim were thrown to find the most favorable day. The date was set. The letters were sent to every province. And in the city of Susa, when the decree arrived, many were confused and disturbed, but Mordecai knew what it meant. He put on sackcloth, he covered himself in ashes. He went out into the city and wept loudly, bitterly, without stopping. When I heard what he was doing, I was troubled. I sent him clothes to cover the sackcloth, to stop the mourning. He would not take them. And then he sent a message to me through Haphach, my servant. He told me everything. The decree, the money, the names on the lists. He told me that all of his people, my people, had been marked for death. And then he said, the thing that I will carry with me for the rest of my life, he said, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. He said, if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And then he said, who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. I sat very still for a long time after I read those words. My hands were quiet in my lap, but inside me everything was moving because I knew what he was asking. He was asking me to go to the king, to approach the king in his inner court without being summoned. And I knew the law. Everyone knew the law. Anyone who approached the king in his inner court without being summoned, man or woman, would be put to death, unless the king extended his golden scepter, unless the king chose to show mercy, and the king had not summoned me in 30 days. 30 days. I was queen. I wore the crown. I lived in the palace. And the king had not called for me in 30 days. I sat with that fear. I let myself feel it fully. I did not pretend it was not real. Because pretending fear is not real does not make you brave. It only makes you dishonest. Real courage begins with honesty. I am afraid. I am genuinely, deeply afraid. And I do not know what the king will do. And I do not know if I will walk out of that throne room alive. I prayed. Not the quiet, whispering prayers of my childhood bedroom, something deeper, something more desperate and more searching. God of my fathers, I am here. I am exactly here, in this moment, in this fear. You see me. You know what's being asked of me? You know what is at stake? My people, Mordecai, every Jewish man and woman and child in this empire, and my own life. God, I cannot do this in my own strength. I have no strategy clever enough. I have no words persuasive enough. I have no beauty compelling enough. If anything good happens here, it will be because you moved, because you prepared the king's heart, because you went before me. I know this. So I'm asking you to go before me. I am asking you to do what only you can do. And then I wrote to Mordecai. My answer was this: go. Gather all the Jews who are in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast. And then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. If I perish, those 4 words. They are perhaps the bravest words I have ever spoken. Not because they expressed no fear, but because they expressed it completely and then moved forward anyway. I am afraid that I may die, and I will go anyway, because this is what I was made for. Because these are my people. Because there is a God who sees the whole story, and he brought me here to this crown in this moment for this purpose. If I perish, I perish. We fasted. All 3 days? And those 3 days were some of the most interior, most searching, most profound days of my life. I stripped away everything that was not essential. No food, no water, no distraction. Just silence and prayer and the raw, honest, terrifying presence of God. I wept. I was not ashamed to weep. I brought everything before him. My fear, my inadequacy, my grief for my people, my love for Mordecai, my uncertainty, my smallness. I laid it all down. And somewhere in the middle of those 3 days, something shifted. Not the fear. The fear was still there. But underneath the fear, something else. Something steady, something old. The knowledge that I was not alone, that I had never been alone, that the God who had carried Abraham through his wandering, and Moses through his wilderness, and Ruth through her exile, that God was carrying me too. That he had been carrying me since the day my parents died and Mordecai held out his arms. Since the day I sat by a window and asked if God could see me, he had always seen me. He had always known. And he had been preparing me all along for exactly this. For such a time as this. On the third day, I put on my royal robes. I stood in front of the polished bronze mirror and looked at myself, Queen of Persia, an orphan girl from a foreign people, a woman with no power of her own, about to walk into the most powerful room in the most powerful empire in the world and speak words that could mean the difference between life and death for thousands of people. I looked at myself and I breathed, God, you see me? You know me, you made me, you brought me here, go before me. And I walked toward the inner court. That is the first thing I remember. The king was seated on his royal throne in the throne room, facing the entrance. And the moment I stepped through the doorway, he saw me. I had been praying all the way there. Every step of the long walk through the corridors, every breath between the columns, praying quietly, internally, with the kind of concentrated focus that leaves no room for anything else. God, God, God. Just that one word repeated like a heartbeat. And when his eyes found mine across that great, formal space, he held out his golden scepter. I crossed the room. I touched the tip of the scepter. And the king said, with the ease of a man accustomed to granting favors, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given you, even to half of my kingdom." I had rehearsed this moment. I had prayed over it and thought through it and carefully considered what to say. And when I said surprised even me, I did not say, "There is a man named Haman who has condemned my people to death." I did not say, "I am Jewish and we are all going to die." I said, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a feast that I have prepared." A feast. I invited them to a feast. Mordecai had taught me to observe, to see what others overlook. And I had observed enough of this king to know that he needed time, that the truth needed to be given at the right moment, that there is a season for everything, a season to speak and a season to wait, and wisdom is knowing the difference. They came to the feast. The food was beautiful. The wine was poured. The king was pleased. And again he asked, "What is your request?" And again I said, "Come tomorrow. Come to another feast, and then I will tell you." Haman left the first feast in high spirits. He was honored. He was satisfied. He was the only person invited to dine with the queen. His pride was full and warm. And then he passed through the king's gate, and Mordecai was there. And Mordecai did not bow, did not tremble, did not even rise. Haman's joy curdled instantly. He went home and gathered his friends and his wife Zeresh, and he told them about his glory, his riches, his position, his sons, his honor, and about being invited exclusively to dine with the queen. "Yet all of this is worth nothing to me," he said, "as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate." Those words. Haman had everything, everything. And one man's refusal to bow had made all of it meaningless to him. That is what unchecked pride does. It makes a man rich in every visible way and empty in every true one. His wife and his friends told him to build a gallows 75 feet high, and in the morning asked the king to hang Mordecai on it, and then go to the feast, happy. He liked this plan. He built the gallows. He planned to ask the king in the morning, but that night the king could not sleep. I did not know this then. I only learned of it later, putting the pieces of the story together. The king could not sleep, and he asked for the book of memorable deeds to be read to him, the chronicles, the records, and what was read to him from all the long records of the kingdom was the account of how Mordecai had once uncovered a plot to assassinate the king and had reported it, and the king's life had been saved. The king asked, "What honor has been given to Mordecai for this?" And the answer was, "Nothing." Nothing had been done. At that very moment, Haman was waiting in the outer court, having arrived early to ask the king to hang Mordecai on his new gallows. The king summoned him. The king asked, "What should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor?" And Haman, in his pride, assuming the king could only mean him, described the most elaborate, public, beautiful honor he could imagine. Royal robes worn by the king, a horse ridden by the king, a proclamation through the city square, "Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor." The king said quickly, "Take the robes and the horse. Do this for Mordecai, the Jew who sits at the king's gate." I have thought many times about that moment, the moment when Haman realized what was happening, the moment when pride meets reality, when the carefully constructed tower of self-importance suddenly has no foundation. He led Mordecai through the city square on the king's horse. He cried out the proclamation, and then he went home, devastated and ashamed, and told his wife and his friends what had happened. And his wise men and his wife Zeresh said, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not overcome him. You will surely fall before him." The moment they finished speaking, the king's servants arrived to bring Haman to Esther's second feast. God's timing is not always the timing we would choose. It is often slower than we want, often more complicated, often working through unexpected channels. A sleepless king, an old record read by lamplight, a pride-filled man who thought the honor was meant for him. We want God to act immediately. We want the rescue to be sudden and obvious. But God is often working through the night, through the reading of old records, through the small and seemingly accidental things that only look accidental until the story's over. Then you look back and see that nothing was accidental. Not one thing. I went to the second feast with everything I had prayed over and prepared for. The king asked again, "What is your petition, Queen Esther?" And this time I answered, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me for my petition, and my people for my request." I said those words, my life, my people. I revealed myself, the hidden thing, the carried secret, the flame held in cupped hands for all those years. I opened my hands. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. The king's eyes changed. Who is he? Where is he? Who would presume to do this? And I said the name I had not been able to say. A foe and an enemy, this wicked Haman. The rest moved quickly. The king rose from the feast in fury. Haman fell on my couch, pleading for his life. The king returned and saw him, and his fury became complete. A servant said, "The gallows that Haman has prepared for Mordecai, whose word saved the king, is standing at Haman's house, 75 feet high." The king said, "Hang him on that." And they did, and the king's anger was pacified. I tell you this not to celebrate the death of any man. I tell you this because there are truths here about the way the world works, about the way God works, that I want you to hold. The thing Haman built to destroy Mordecai became the instrument of Haman's own destruction. The plan designed to end my people gave way to their deliverance. What was meant for evil was turned in the hands of God towards something else entirely. I did not plan that. I could not have planned that. I only showed up. I only told the truth. I only trusted. And God did what only God could do. He gave Mordecai his signet ring. And I, still trembling, still processing the enormity of all that had just happened, fell at the king's feet and wept. I wept for the fear that I had carried, for the 3 days of fasting, the prayers in the dark, for Mordecai standing at the gate day after day, for my people all those men and women and children across the provinces who did not yet know that God had moved on their behalf. I wept because I was relieved and because I was grateful, and because sometimes when the thing you were most afraid of does not happen, the tears come not in the moment of danger, but in the moment of safety. You are strong while you have to be strong, and then you weep. And that is not weakness. That is honesty. There was still work to do. The original decree, sealed with the king's ring, could not simply be undone. The law of the Medes and Persians, a decree written in the king's name and sealed with his ring, cannot be revoked. But I went before the king again. I asked for my people. The king gave Mordecai and me permission to write another decree, also in the king's name, also sealed with his ring, giving the Jews the right to defend themselves, to fight back, to protect their lives. The decree went out, and the city of Susa rejoiced. And the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province, in every city, wherever the king's command and his edict reached, there was gladness and joy among the Jews. A feast and a holiday. I think about that phrase. Light and gladness and joy and honor. 4 things, not just survival, not just relief. Light, gladness, joy, honor. When God saves, he does not save minimally. He does not preserve a remnant and leave them in shadows. He brings them into light. He restores gladness. He gives joy. He grants honor to those who were meant to be destroyed. That is the God I serve. That is the God who saw me as a small girl at a window. The God who sees the overlooked, the orphaned, the displaced, the hidden, and brings us into light. Mordecai wrote letters to all the Jews establishing a new feast, Purim, named for the pur, the lots that Haman had cast to determine the best day to destroy us. Haman cast lots to find the right day for our destruction, and God took those very lots and turned them into the foundation of a celebration. The day meant for our mourning became a day for our feasting. The day marked for our weeping became a day marked for our joy. Every year, for every generation, for such a time as this. I've thought about those words for the rest of my life. Mordecai's words to me when I was afraid and uncertain. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? I want to speak directly to you now in this moment, wherever you are. You who are listening to this story. You who may feel small or hidden or overlooked. You who may be carrying a secret that has felt heavy for a long time. You who may be standing in a corridor right now, looking at a closed door, trying to decide whether to step forward or step back. Esther's story is not a story about a queen. It is a story about an ordinary woman who was faithful in the small things, faithful in the preparation, faithful in the waiting, faithful in the secret prayers of ordinary mornings, and who, when the extraordinary moment came, was ready. Not because she had suddenly become someone different, because she had become fully herself. You are where you are for a reason. That position you hold, that family you are part of, that community, that workplace, that moment in history, you are there on purpose. Your specific voice, your specific perspective, your specific presence, it matters. God does not make mistakes. He did not put you in the wrong place. He did not give you the wrong story. Every ordinary year of your life, every quiet morning, every unanswered prayer, every season that felt like waiting, he was preparing you. He was shaping you. He was placing you for such a time as this. The courage that Esther showed was not spontaneous. It grew slowly over years. It grew in the evenings listening to Mordecai tell stories. It grew in the quiet, private, whispered prayers of a girl who was not sure anyone heard her. It grew in the 12 months of preparation. It grew in the 3 days of fasting. Courage is not a sudden arrival. It is a thing that is built, day by day, prayer by prayer, faithful step by faithful step. And When the moment comes, and the moment always comes, it is there, ready, because you have been building it all along. If you are in a season of waiting right now, I want you to hear this. The waiting is not wasted. The ordinary is not empty. God is in all of it, in the small house, in the quiet mornings, in the stories passed down, in the prayers that seem to disappear into silence. He is there. He is preparing you. If you're in a season of fear right now, standing at the entrance of something large and uncertain, looking at a door you are not sure you should walk through, I want you to hear Mordecai's voice. Who knows whether you have not come to this moment for such a time as this? You have. Walk forward. You do not have to be fearless. You only have to move. If I perish, and God will be glorified. But you may not perish. You may walk through that door and find that the king extends his scepter, that the very thing designed to destroy you becomes the foundation of a celebration, that the lots cast against you become Purim, a feast, a joy, a song. God is that good. He is that specific. He is that faithful. My name is Esther. I was an orphan girl in a foreign land. I had no power, no inheritance, no standing. I had only a quiet faith and a willingness to move forward when everything in me wanted to stay still. And God used me. He used all of it, the loss, the displacement, the hidden identity, the fear. He used Mordecai's faithfulness and Heggai's kindness, and a sleepless king, and an old record read by lamplight. He used every single piece of my ordinary, uncertain, trembling story, and he made something beautiful. He will do the same with yours. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who has brought us to this season. Amen. If you believe in the power of this story to touch the heart and transform thoughts, sign up now. Together, we can bring these teachings to those who haven't had the chance to hear.